What up, athletes? Welcome back to my channel. Today we're in the national park. This is the rainy season in Guyana. It's June 21st. It's the beginning of summer in North America, but in Guyana we're in the middle of the rainy season, which goes from May until July. It's like we call it the May-June rains. And that means that we sometimes get floods because it rains every day, sometimes 4 or 5 or 6 times a day and during the night, and sometimes it rains for like 8 hours at a time, and sometimes there are thunderstorms where there's a lot of rain. And so let me show you what's happening in the park. What it means usually is that the grass starts growing rapidly, like within a matter of weeks, 1 or 2 weeks, you get really high grass and shrubs all over the place. You get floods, the pools, and you get a lot of water on the ground. So we're in the middle of the May-June rains. But what I want to talk about today is state capture and the concept of the Dutch disease. So this channel has become a channel about chronicling the development in Guyana, you know, how the oil and gas industry is changing Guyana, and I've been showing over the last year or so some of the major projects, the hotels, the roads that are being constructed, and how the city skyline is changing. All right, most recently I've been showing you progress on the Best Western Hotel, and previous to that I've shown you some projects that are happening around the Georgetown area, one of which was the building of these pump stations, right? And I actually showed you a sign that tells you how much it costs to build a pump station, and that implicated a lot of corruption in the system, because it showed that the cost of a pump station was roughly about 350 million Guyana dollars, and that goes back to 10 years ago. The price hasn't changed significantly, but there was a recent deal with Critic and his group, the Tipui group, where the government had given them $800 million to build a pump station. That was Critic, the Guyanese Critic, and his business partner, the Mohammeds. So what has recently happened in Guyana is that the nation has been put in an uproar over recent sanctions by the US government meted out to the Mohammeds. That is the 2 businessmen who run the Mohammeds group and the Mohammeds racing team, and Mohammeds Cambios and gold operations in Guyana. So it turns out that the US government has been tracking the business transactions of the Mohammeds that involve US banks over the last 5 years, and they have now come out with sanctions against the Mohammeds. Now remember, I said that in Guyana, a lot of these contracts are a lot of the contracts, the government contracts, the procurement process is tainted with corruption. And as soon as you say that, a lot of the political supporters of the current political party get into the comments and they start arguing. In fact, some people, you don't know which political party they belong to because they don't even live in Guyana, but they're arguing that I am partisan simply because I point out the corruption in Guyana. Well, guess what? Now the US government has pointed out the corruption of the Mohammed group, and what they're basically saying is that the Mohammeds, along with one of the permanent secretaries in the Ministry of Labor, I think, is involved in a system of gold smuggling, and apparently they are also involved in a system of bias in the procurement process. In other words, they are able to influence the government to get contracts, government contracts, which is basically taxpayer money going towards development of Guyana, but going towards individual business people. So what the US government is saying is that they have evidence that the Mohammeds are involved in state capture. Now, what is state capture? State capture is when a business person, a businessman, for example, is able to bribe the political party in control of the government so that they can get contracts from the government. That means they're basically funneling taxpayer money into their business. Now, the last time we've heard us talk about state capture is in South Africa, where the Gupta brothers were able to get Jacob Zuma, the president of South Africa, to grant them deals, business deals, that allow them to control major sectors of the economy because they got the support of the government. Right now, it turns out that this is what the Americans are saying about the Mohammeds, that the Mohammeds have been, based on records of transactions in the United States, that is perhaps moving money to the US, the Mohammeds have been involved in money laundering, in gold smuggling, and in state capture, as far as being able to get contracts, government contracts, in a non-competitive way, right? Now, when I mentioned some of this stuff in my previous videos, a lot of people come out of the woodworks to argue that I am being partisan and I'm against their political party. Now, I guess people will be more inclined to believe when the Americans make the same observation that I have made. That is that not only is Critic and his group, his partnership with the Mohammeds engaged in some kind of corruption because they're able to get $800 million for a job that typically costs $350 million. The Americans are saying that they have evidence of more than this happening, right? In other words, it supports my assessment of the situation with the contract to build the pump station, right? So this is what state capture is. State capture is when a political party is being controlled by an individual businessman. In this case, the Mohammeds were members of the ruling political party. In other words, they are actually officially members of the ruling political party, the PPP, and they have been contributing majorly. In other words, they've been making major financial contributions to the political party, the ruling political party. They've actually supplied the president with transportation, right? They have provided the vehicles which transported the president, the current president of Guyana, around the country during the last political campaign, and they have managed to procure a disproportionate number of contracts for themselves and their group in a non-competitive way. In other words, getting more money than typical competing businesses were able to garner, that is to get from the government, and they're able to get their license, for example, to run a cambio, allows them to collect US dollars, in other words, to transact business in US dollars, and to use those US dollars as a way to leverage, in other words, to move money around the world. What the Americans are saying is that based on transactions that they have been following, they've been tracking, the Mohammeds have been engaged in smuggling, gold smuggling, in money laundering that is moving US dollars around, because US dollars anywhere in the world belongs to the United States, right? So any transaction, any movement of US dollars will involve a US bank and the US Treasury, because the US Treasury actually prints that money, right? So the question is, are we witnessing state capture the way the Guptas captured the state of South Africa in Guyana? Are we witnessing the same thing? In other words, when you talk about the danger of the Dutch disease, right? When Guyana first entered the oil markets, everybody was talking about the potential for corruption, Dutch disease. What they didn't really tell you is that the Dutch disease is basically something like state capture. It's basically corruption, internal corruption. It's also exploitation by foreign entities like ExxonMobil, who are able to procure contracts with